1. Explain in detail how a bill becomes a law from its introduction to its becoming law. Be sure to include the following. A. The various steps that a bill goes through from a bill's introduction. Once introduced, the bill is sent to a clerk of the chamber and gives it a number. Then it's printed and sent out to the appropriate committee. Committee will refer it to subcommittee whose staff researches proposed legislation. B. The different processes in the House and Senate. Senate, no rules committee that decides, it is the set majority leader. C. The process after a bill makes it through each chamber. The third stage of action, the bill is reviewed and revised by a conference committee, which usually consists of the members from the original committees from the House and Senate. They iron out any differences between the two versions of the bill, and if agreed upon, the bill is returned to each chamber for a final vote. If passed, it goes before the President. D. The role of the President in the process and the resulting response by Congress. President has power to veto, Congress can override veto. E. An explanation of at least 3 different factors that influence a representative's vote. Constituent views. Main drive is re-election, so you want to listen to what they're saying. Congressional staff, they know what is going on with the bill, etc., their knowledge can sway to one representative or another. Interest groups also influence how a representative will vote. Party leadership will also try to influence how a rep votes. The party leader will use carrots, fundraising. Personal views. 2. Explain in detail the process by which a court case makes its way to and is decided by the U.S. Supreme Court. Be sure that your answer includes the following. A. Standing. Who is entitled to sue? Real controversy which relates to money or restriction of liberty. Harm. Taxpayer not usually sufficient to challenge federal government. Sovereign immunity, if the government allows it. B. The process of the original jury trial. Supreme Court of U.S. diagram in notes. C. The process of the appellate court's review findings. D. Supreme Court's process of agreeing to hear a case through how the court renders its decision, including the 3 types of opinions. Do not discuss judicial philosophy. Bulk of the essay. 5 steps. Judges agree to hear a case, 4/9. No criteria for it to move to the next step. Briefs filed, using legal documents or arguments for both sides, amicus curiae maybe. Formal arguments before judges, justices get to ask questions and attorneys can reply. Not as formal as legal briefs. Conferences between the justices where they vote and assign opinions. Announcing opinions, majority opinion vs plurality opinion, do not hold the same weight. Plurality, spread out votes, no majority. Concurring opinion equals when justice agrees with result but disagrees with majority for different reasons than everyone else. Agrees with the main idea but have their own reasoning behind it rather than the majority's reasoning. Example, Affordable Care Act. Dissenting opinion equals disagrees with the majority. Generally loses. Reasoning behind this is due to vanity. The court may change their mind later, or the case may get more support. E. An explanation of 2 factors that affect the implementation of a decision. Members of the implementation population, lawyers, judges, public officials, etc., need to show they understand the original decision. The consumer population needs to understand the rights that a decision grants/denies them. Example, teens seeking an abortion need to know that most states require them to inform their parents of their intention to have an abortion or get parental permission to do so. Multiple choice questions. The following questions will be the basis for the multiple choice questions section of the exam. I say basis because a number of questions will require analysis that demonstrates comprehension and understanding, not merely rote memorization. Congress, feel free to add extra data that I miss or just change things around. How are each chamber of Congress structured, i.e., size, term of office, number of terms that may be served, mode of election. House of Representatives. Size, 435 representatives, 1 representative for 30,000 people. Term, 2 years, no term limit, entire body up for re-election every 2 years. Mode of election, the eligible electorate in each congressional district votes to elect members of the House of Rep to 2-year terms, the people in districts vote for them. Senate. Size, 100 voting members, 2 from each state. Term, 6-year terms, 1/3 RD up for re-election every 2 years, no term limit. Mode of election, direct election of senators by voters. Bicameralism, divided v unified government. Bicameralism, legislature divided into 2 houses. Divided government. The political condition in which different political parties control the presidency and Congress. Unified gov. The political condition in which the same political party controls the presidency and Congress / What are the major powers and functions of Congress? Lay and collect taxes and duties. Borrow money. Regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the states. Establish rules for naturalization, process of becoming a citizen, and bankruptcy. Coin money, set its value, and fix the standard of weights and measures. Punish counterfeiting. Issue patents and copyrights. Declare war. Authority to make laws, raise and spend money, power of the purse. Pass or propose laws by consent of both houses. Raise an army and navy. Establish federal courts and their jurisdiction. Ratify treaties, Senate. Delegate v. trustee theory of representation. Delegate. Role played by an elected representative who votes the way his or her constituents would want, regardless of personal opinion. Trustee. Role played by an elected representative who listens to constituents' opinions and then uses his or her best judgment to make a final decision. Politico. An elected representative who acts as a trustee or delegate, depending on the issue. What are the advantages of having a Senate? Protects interests of states. Stability equals longer term in office so they don't entirely act to get re-elected and focus more on what needs to get done, similar to judicial branch for life. Superior talent, experience, knowledge equals 6 years to have more time to develop more experience. What is a filibuster? What is a cloture rule? How many votes in the Senate does it take to end a filibuster? Filibuster. A formal way of halting Senate action on a bill by means of long speeches or unlimited debates, talking a bill to death. There is no limit on what they can talk about, so they can talk about random things for hours endlessly in hopes of withdrawing/killing a bill. Cloture rule. Rule declaring the end of a debate in the Senate. Mechanism requiring the vote of 60 senators to cut off the debate. How many votes in Senate to end filibuster? 60 senators must vote and sign a cloture to end the filibuster. What is the job and major powers of the Speaker of the House, the Majority Leader of the Senate? Speaker of the House. Presides over the House of Representatives, oversees House business and is the official spokesperson for the House. Refer bills to committee. Sign legislation, writs, and warrants. Smooth the passage of party-backed legislation through the House. What is a party-backed legislation? Any type of law or policy that a certain party wants to get passed. Paul Ryan, a Republican, tries to smoothen the process of passing policies/laws that are backed up by other Republicans. Generally has great political influence within the chamber and in policy negotiations with the president. Preside over the daily sessions of the Senate. Preserve order in the chamber. Appoint committee chairs and members. Majority Leader. Controls most seats in the Senate. Develops the calendar. Directs activities of the Senate. What are the jobs of the majority/minority and majority/minority whips of both chambers? Speaker of the House. Preside over the House of Representatives. Oversee House business, and official spokesman for the House and being second in the line of presidential succession, after Vice President. Expected to smooth the passage of party-backed legislation through the House. Sets the agenda for the House. Majority Leader of the Senate. Because Senate is small and more collegial body, Majority Leader is not nearly as powerful as the Speaker of the House. Coordinate members of parties and ensure party loyalty. Directs activities. Majority Leader of House. Head of the party controlling the most seats in the House. Helps the Speaker of the House schedule proposed legislations for debate on House floor. Gather info in where members stand with, round up votes, take head counts on where people stand, and persuade members. Minority Leader of the House. Peel off members of the opposition to get them to vote for their party. Attempt to persuade their party and keep them in line. Second highest number of seats. Whips for House and Senate. Assist the Speaker, Majority, and Minority Leaders in their leadership efforts. Whip fellow Democrats and Republicans into line on partisan issues. Maintain close contact with all members on important votes. Prepare summaries of consent and implications of bill, take vote counts during debates and votes. Persuade members to toe the party lines. Serve as communication links, distributing word of the party line from leaders to rank and file members, alerting leaders to concern in the ranks. Speak to the media on behalf of the party. Minority Leader of Senate. Write filibusters, prevent things from happening. What are congressional committees? What functions do they serve? Explain and give an example of standing committee, select committee, joint committee. Congressional committees. A legislative sub-organization in the United States Congress that handles a specific duty, rather than the general duties of Congress. Are of four types: standing, joint, conference, and select group, or special. Standing committees. Most important, permanent committees. Responsible for most legislation, about 20 people per chamber. X, Armed Forces, Agriculture, Budget, etc. Joint committees. Standing committees that include members from both houses of Congress and are set up to conduct investigations or special studies. Conference committees. Special joint committees created to reconcile differences in bills passed by the House and Senate. Select, or special. Temporary committees appointed for specific purposes. For example, investigating 9/11 terrorists attacks. What does the House Rules Committee do? Major role in the House's lawmaking process. Speaker directly appoints its chair and majority party members. They review most bills after they come from a committee and before they go to full chamber for consideration. They perform a traffic cop function where they give each other bill what is called a rule, which contains the date of the bill will come up for debate and time it will be for discussion and often specifies what kinds of amendments can be offered. What is the difference between an open rule and a closed rule? Open rule. An open rule permits amendments from the floor. Closed rule sets a strict time limit on debate and forbids the introduction of any amendments. Bills under a closed rule cannot be amended. Terms. Appropriation. Act of setting aside money for specific purposes. A legislative act authorizing the expenditure of a designated amount of public funds for a specific purpose. Rider. During the full Senate debates over the bill, senators can keep proposing amendments and any amendments on any subject known as a rider. When they agree to stop amending, the bill will be up for debate. Another definition for rider: unpopular provision added to an important bill certain to pass so that it will ride through the legislative process. Pork barrel legislation. Legislations that allows representatives to bring money and jobs to their districts in the form of public works programs, military bases, or other programs. What are the factors that influence how members of Congress vote on legislation? In addition to weighing their representational role, they also consider other factors when deciding how to vote on a piece of the legislation. These other factors are political parties, constituents, interest groups and lobbyists, staff and support agencies. Define. Reapportionment. Process by which congressional districts are redrawn and seats are redistributed among states in the House. Occurs every 10 years after the census data report shifts in the population of districts. Redistricting. Process of redrawing congressional districts to reflect increases or decreases in seats allotted to the states, as well as population shifts within a state. Gerrymandering. The drawing of congressional districts to produce a particular electoral outcome without regard to the shape of the district. What's an incumbent? What are some of the advantages of incumbency? What has been the long-term trend of the re-election rates of incumbents? Incumbent. A person already in office, they have advantage in elections over newcomers. Advantages. Stay in office once they are elected. Name recognition. Access to free media. Inside track on fundraising. A district drawn to favor the incumbent. Greater media coverage. Long-term trends of re-election rates on incumbents. On average, 95% of incumbents who seek re-election win their primary and general election races. Those who do lose were affected by redistricting, scandals, and coattails. What is the name of the person currently serving in the following positions: Speaker of the U.S. House, Majority Leader of the U.S. House, Minority Leader of the U.S. House, President of the U.S. Senate, Majority Leader of the U.S. Senate, Minority Leader of the U.S. Senate. Speaker of the U.S. House. Paul Ryan, RWI. Majority Leader of the U.S. House. Kevin McCarthy, RCA. Minority Leader of House. Nancy Pelosi, DCA. President of the U.S. Senate. Mike Pence, Vice President of the U.S. Majority Leader of Senate. Mitch McConnell. Minority Leader of Senate. Charles Chuck Schumer. What does the War Powers Act require? Requires the authorization of Congress if the U.S., its territories, or armed forces are attacked to permit the President to send troops into action. Also, requires the President to notify Congress within 48 hours of committing troops to foreign soil. In addition, President must withdraw troops within 60 days unless Congress votes to declare war. President must also consult with Congress, if at all possible, prior to committing troops. Presidency. How is the office of President structure, i.e., size, term of office, number of terms that may be served, mode of election? Size. 1. Primary function, execute the laws. Qualification. 35. Natural-born citizen. Young people don't have enough experience, good judgment, and job experience, so they won't be good presidents of the United States. Term. 4 years, 2-term limit. More than House, less than Senate. Electors, Electoral College. What are the main powers and functions of the President? Commander-in-Chief. Make treaties, receive ambassadors. Executor of the laws, with discretion. Appointments. Cabinet, Supreme Court. Veto, recommend legislation. Congress can ignore legislation. Pardon. Informal, exec. Privilege. Right of President not to have his communications made public. How does the Constitution divide foreign/military powers between Congress and the President? Congress used to have more power than executive branch and wanted to keep it that way. The Tenure Office Act kept the President from removing any cabinet-level appointees from previous administration. After the New Deal, the President has played an important role in proposing legislation and spending. Congress has the authority to declare war. President take care that the laws be faithfully executed to wage war. What are the 3 main factors that contributed to the rise of the strong and personal presidency? Establishment of presidential authority, incremental expansions of presidential powers, the creation of the modern presidency, maybe, not sure though. Why did the framers have a negative view of a president who used popular rhetoric to persuade, to sympathize with, and to inspire citizens? What was Woodrow Wilson's criticism of the Constitution's separation of powers, and how did he change the way that the president interacted with Congress and the public? Designed to be limited in scope. President supposed to be constitutional officer. EX 1860, Lincoln elected and SCC seated. Reaction, No comment. EX James Madison, house burned down in War of 1812. Reaction, nothing. EX 9/11 and Bush said nothing to American people. Only talked to Congress. Public wants direct communication from President. Holds them accountable. President as constitutional officer, not popular leader. No popular rhetoric, no campaigning. Not supposed to tell the public what they're doing, wearing, etc. etc. The way that Lincoln and Madison behaved is according to office, but those expectations changed later. Once there's direct communication equals demagoguery. Woodrow Wilson invents modern presidency. He didn't like the American system because it had too much gridlock. Tried to overcome gridlock by making president the center of the gridlock. Prior to the 1930s, which branch of government usually led policy making? Congress. The office of the president consists of three main groups. What are they? The cabinet, the office of the vice president, and the executive office. They report directly to the President-X's White House office and staff, NSC, CEA, OMB, OPD. Explain what each of the following agencies do: National Security Council, Office of Management and Budget, State Department, Defense Department, Treasury Department, Justice Department. National Security Council protects security of the U.S.'s borders and safety of the people. X's, ICE, Border Control, Coast Guard, Secret Service, FEMA. Office of Management and Budget prepares President's budget. Employs hundreds of budget and policy experts. Assesses the costs of the President's proposals. Reviews the progress, budget, and program proposals of the executive department agencies. State Department handles the foreign policy of the nation. Staffs embassies. Analyzes data about American interests in other nations. Speaks for the U.S. Defense Department protects security of U.S. Oversees the U.S. Armed Forces through Joint Chief of Staff. Budget, $600 billion. Treasury Department serves as financial divisions. Manages public debt. Collects taxes. Manufactures coins and currency. Regulates and collects taxes from producers and distributors of alcohol and tobacco. Budget, $14 billion. 86K employees. Justice Department oversees the nation's legal affairs. FBI, DEA, ATF, U.S. Marshals, BOP. Budget, $30 billion. 113K employees. What is an executive order and a signing statement and the criticisms of them? Executive order, presidential directives based on statutes or the Constitution that have force or law. They have routine administration, but some executive orders have been controversial. Examples: Emancipation Proclamation, Japanese internment, DACA, Muslim ban. They are controversial because exercising executive order means the president is exercising legislative power, which is not what a separation of powers intended. Terms: executive agreement, executive privilege, pardon. Executive agreement, international agreement regarding routine administrative matters, made by exec branch without ratification by Senate. Executive privilege, privilege of the president to withhold information to the public. Pardon. A pardon is a government decision to allow a person who has been convicted of a crime to be free and absolved of that conviction, as if never convicted. Bureaucracy. What are the main functions of the federal bureaucracy? Provide expertise. Implement laws. Make, enforce, and adjudicate administrative rules. What are the four main types of federal bureaucracies and how are they structured? Cabinet departments. Each department does a different job and handles factors that pertain to that job, Department of State, Treasury, Defense, etc. Independent agencies. Administered by a presidential appointee with no fixed term. If person has fixed term, the person is not removable by the president. Responsible for narrower set of functions than department. EXSSA, Coast Guard, CIA, NASA. Independent regulatory agencies/commissions. Independent of any department or agency. Each headed by a group of 5 to 10 commissioners who are appointed by President to fixed terms and not subject to removal by President. EXSEC, FFC, and the Federal Reserve. Government corporations. Permits organizations to use business-like method and remain politically independent. Run by boards of directors appointed by President to long terms. EX Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC, the Student Loan Management Authority, Sallie Mae, Postal Service. What is the Federal Reserve System and what are its main responsibilities? Sets monetary policy that affects interest rates. Regulates banks. What was the spoils system? Why was it abandoned? Spoils system: the practice of a successful political party giving public office to its supporters. Andrew Jackson used government jobs or patronage to reward supporters and to remove elitists from the bureaucracy. Based on loyal support, give more people an opportunity to serve the government. Why? Rewarded people in terms of party loyalty, employing them developed problems. B/C Some people weren't actually good at their jobs. What did the Pendleton and Hatch Acts do, i.e. how are bureaucrats hired, what employment rights do they have, and what restrictions are imposed on their political activities? Pendleton Act made it so that hiring people was based on merit, not party support, and created the civil service system to oversee hiring/firing. They are administered by a presidential appointee with no fixed terms. What is administrative discretion and why is it so important? Define and explain the significance of administrative rulemaking and adjudication. The exercise of professional expertise and judgment, as opposed to strict adherence to regulations or statutes, in making a decision or performing official acts or duties. A discretionary action is informal and, therefore, unprotected by the safeguards inherent in formal procedure. Functions of bureaucracy. Provide expertise. Implement laws. Make, enforce, and adjudicate administrative rules. What are the main constraints that shape how the federal bureaucracy operates? What bureaucratic pathologies result from those constraints? Accountable by money/spending, revision of statutes, House, Senate approval of appointees, Senate, threat of hearings and investigations, the power to create or destroy agencies. Pathologies. Red tape. The Peter Principle, incompetence always rises to the top. Bureaucratic imperialism, they tend to grow and absorb/merge, get bigger with others because they can exercise judicial, executive, and legislative powers. Political constituencies. Wasteful of money because of spend it or lose it mentality. Accountability for problems is difficult. What means does the president have at his disposal to control the bureaucracy? How much control does the president have in appointing members of bureaucracy? Appointment power, but presidents only appoints about 9K out of 3 mil civilian federal employees, only 3-5K could be fired. What means does Congress have to control the bureaucracy? Power of the purse. Revision of empowering or limiting statutes. Senate approval of certain appointees. Threats of hearings and investigations. The power to create or destroy agencies. Define, iron triangle. The relationship between Congress, especially subcommittees, government agencies, bureaucracy, and interest groups. This helps create policy in the United States, and all three parts want to protect their own self-interests. Judiciary. How is the Supreme Court structured, i.e., size, term of office, number of terms that may be served, method of appointment. Size, set by Congress, 9 present. Mode of appointment, President nominates, Senate confirms. Term of office, good behavior, life. Explain the nomination and confirmation process of judges. How has it changed over time? Presidential criteria for nomination. Credentials. Judicial philosophy. Political party. Rough indicator of their judicial philosophy. Demographics, age, race, sex, religion, geography. President try to choose people relatively young with the expectation that they'll be around long to have an impact. Support in Senate. Can they get confirmed by Senate? Usually that's where the problem lies. Senate confirmation process. Judiciary Committee holds hearings and votes whether to recommend nominee, full Senate then votes. Senate generally less deferential when voting to confirm judicial nominees than executive branch nominees. The reason for the hearings is not to try to ferret out the nominees' views or persuade senators, their audience is you, trying to gain favor with their partisan base. The most partisan Dem and Rep are the people who follow closely is nominated to go to Supreme Court. It's to protect themselves for re-election, trying to get nominees to commit ahead of time, but judge is supposed to be impartial. Confirmation process has become more public and interest groups exert more influence in terms of who the president decides to nominate and the chances of a person getting confirmed. Who is the current Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court? John Glover Roberts, Jr. How is the American court system structured? Supreme Court to US Courts of Appeal, 13 Circuit Courts, and lastly US District Courts, 94 Trial Courts. Or Supreme Court, to State Supreme Courts, to Intermediate Appellate Courts, 39 50th states, and lastly State Trial Courts, across 50 states. Define, original jurisdiction, appellate jurisdiction. Which type of jurisdiction does the Supreme Court usually have? Original jurisdiction, the authority to first hear/try a case. Appellate jurisdiction, the authority to review the proceedings of a lower court. Purpose much narrower. All they do is look over the legal procedure to determine if the legal procedure is followed. Question of law. All that happens is a set of lawyers argue before a judge. Supreme Court has appellate jurisdiction except in cases that involve disputes between states, ambassadors, a citizen and a state, where it has original jurisdiction. Power of AJ is determined by Congress. What are the two main types of law that the court must interpret? Criminal and civil. What is judicial review? Which famous Supreme Court case established this power for the judiciary? Judicial review, the power to declare unconstitutional the acts of Congress, the President, and state governments. Marbury v. Madison, how does it tie into judicial review? No details, just know how it goes with judicial review. What are the differences between a criminal and a civil case? Criminal, involve whether to punish, deprive life, liberty, property, for violating the law. Proof has to be beyond a reasonable doubt. Civil, involve resolving disputes between individuals and parties over such issues as money, contract, personal well-being. Someone hits you in a car, you will sue them for damages B/C of health damages. Samsung iPhone blow up and you can get injured, sue them. Only the government gets to decide to pursue a criminal case. Civil case, you just need to afford a lawyer willing to take on the case. Writ of certiorari. How many justices must agree to grant such a writ? Orders a lower court to deliver its record in a case so that the higher court may review it. 4 justices must agree to hear the case. Standing. What are the requirements for having standing? You do not have inherent right to sue the government. Must be a real controversy, no hypothetical cases. Actual harm must be demonstrated. Taxpayer not usually sufficient to challenge federal government. Affordable Care Act was used to sue, has to demonstrate how it impacts how in harmful ways such as money, etc. Sovereign immunity. Can only sue the government if the government lets you sue them, state and local governments decide to. Class action lawsuit. A plaintiff sues a defendant or a number of defendants on behalf of a group, or class, of absent parties. Class action suits for large numbers of people similarly situated. Stare decisis, precedent. When the court decides a case, that case becomes a binding on all future cases. Roe v. Wade, Apply it to all future abortion cases that will happen. Supposed to have a uniform definition of the law equals argument for a good idea to have a precedent. Judicial review. The power to declare unconstitutional the acts of Congress, the President, and state governments. Marbury v. Madison. Congress passed a law in Fed Judd Act that extended the court's original jurisdiction, affirmed the right of the court to review legislation acts of the government. Majority, plurality, concurring, and dissenting opinions. Majority. At least 5 justices sign onto an opinion, sometimes get more than that, unanimous vote. Majority opinion has legal opinion and they decide the case. Plurality, 4,3,2 vote. It is a plurality opinion. Decides issue of reverse or affirm. These opinions do not hold the same weight when it comes to future similar cases. Concurring opinion, S. Concur with majority. Issue with opinion B/C. You agree with the results of the lower decision but you disagree with legal reasoning behind the legal decision. Dissenting opinion, S. Disagree with majority or plurality. Explain why you think they're wrong. They know future courts might change their minds, so that's why they talk about their opinions in hopes that it will change the decisions of future different judges. Who is responsible for implementing Supreme Court decisions? What can the executive and legislative branches do if either disagrees with a court decision? Lower courts. Executive branch. Responsible for enforcing it. Can ignore decisions. State and local governments. Responsible for carrying out decision. If don't like it, can put up resistance. Public opinion. If public not supported of judicial decisions, can put up resistance and can defeat a decision. It is why people talk about how people regard the judiciary and decision. Explain the difference between judicial philosophy and political ideology. Political ideology centers itself on party lines while judicial philosophy bases itself on interpretation of the Constitution. Explain A. Originalism/textualism/strict constructionism and B. Living Constitution/non-originalism. Explain each side's arguments in favor of their approach to constitutional interpretation. Originalism/textualism/strict construction. 1. Follow the clear language of text of Constitution. 2. Clarify ambiguous language by historical research into framing/ratifying debates. 3. Judicial restraint, i.e. deference to elected branches, if above not possible. Arguments for originalism/textualism/strict construction. 1. Because unelected judges may overrule elected branches, they should do so only when the text provides strong support. 2. Rights can be made current by constitutional amendments or regular laws. Living Constitution/non-originalism. 1. Begin with text but meaning must be interpreted in light of current circumstances that framers could not have fully anticipated. 2. Progressive developments in the understanding of principles, expanded notion of rights/liberties and protection of minorities. Arguments for living Constitution/non-originalism. 1. Original meaning difficult to ascertain and unable to cope with current circumstances without creative interpretation.